This is an experiment on the entire global population. I still have to get up each day and pinch myself to think that is this really happening? Am I waking into a nightmare from a decent night's sleep? You've got to realise that we're part of a whole community now. It's growing by the day, and the cracks on the other side, the cracks in the evil bastards who are pushing this, they're becoming quite big. We're going to win this. I'm Dr. Graham Lyons. I'm a research fellow at the University of Adelaide, South Australia. This is pure satanic child abuse. Now they've got, 5 to 11 they're targeting. Next it'll be 2 to 4. Then, what about the newborns? Let's go for them. Or the pregnant women. Doctors are actually advising pregnant women to take this bloody thing. Can't they remember thalidomide? That was just a tablet. Look what it did. This is far worse, on a far greater scale. Doctors advising pregnant women to take this experimental bloody thing, knowing, surely, unless they're utterly ignorant and stupid, and surely to become a doctor you've got to have quite a reasonable level of intelligence, particularly to become a specialist, advising pregnant women to take this thing. I heard that some women in the US are using it as a birth control method, if it's given in the first trimester. We're dealing with pure evil here. I never thought I'd actually be sitting in front of a camera talking in this manner. Despite having studied those who are ultimately behind this, I thought it would be just a gradual process of them trying to take over the world and institute a world government by use of the finance system, subverting politicians, subverting constitutions of different countries. Some people call it the totalitarian tiptoe. This is the totalitarian triple jump that we're seeing now. Someone said the other day, the globalists have entered the room, they're now among us, and they've closed the door behind themselves. But it gives us an opportunity. We can defeat them here. There are big cracks appearing in their agenda, and the more that we can wake people up, that's the key. It's a numbers game. While they have a lot of people acquiescing to this, complying with all the idiot diktats, for example, here in South Australia, every one of them is unlawful, unhealthy, idiotic, and unscientific. And I'm talking about so-called social distancing, face nappy wearing. That's like, you could just use the analogy of putting on a wire mesh fence over your face to keep out something the size of the point of a pin, not even the pin head, the sharp end. That's what we're dealing with there. And in the meantime, they're making people unhealthy. It greatly increases your risk of other true respiratory diseases, which do kill a lot of people per annum. The mind boggles that we would have a chief public health officer decreeing that for a couple of months earlier this year, school children would be wearing these things. As far as I know, not one school principal stood up against this. This wasn't even a direction from the police commissioner. I think he even balked at this, but that's the level of evil we're dealing with. That then leading into these vaccination clinics, as you described, satanic child abuse. Let's not call it by anything less than that. The thing I've found most difficult to accept in this era, this episode we are going through, and it goes back for most people to about February 2020, we're now December 2021, is the number of people who've fallen for the lies of the media and the government and big business, you name it, big tech, they're all in on it. They've fallen for it, and they don't appear to be standing up against it. What we're seeing is a pandemic of people who have decided not to think. Facts mean nothing to them, and that's exactly as I would describe it. Others describe it as sort of mass psychosis. It's like the suicide of our society via mass psychosis. There's a cabal behind this. It hasn't just come from nowhere. It's not something which has come from our society here, or our government's been used as pawns in it. This thing goes back thousands of years, not just hundreds of years. If you hear people who really have studied the history of this, they can describe it with great clarity. It goes back to Babylon, Sumer, this group that emanated from there. They became Satanists at an early stage. They often describe it in different terms. They worship these manifestations of Satan. And over the decade, or the hundreds and thousands of years, they have accumulated vast wealth. They have usurped the banking system of the world. Didn't happen overnight. They've been working on it for a long time. So basically they have enough money to do pretty well whatever they want, to buy off whoever they want to achieve their ends. They are paid, they're fully owned by this cabal. And it's not just one little group of people, it's quite diverse. It involves some religious elements, so-called religious, at the heart of some of our more revered institutions. But they've been operating in secret for a long time. The City of London, Georgetown, Washington DC, that's another centre for them. Unfortunately, do you want me to mention the Vatican? I'll keep that out of it. The Black Pope, the Grey Pope, how deep do you want to get? I'll keep that out of it. You know where the word pharmacy comes from. Pharmakia, the Greek for to trick, to beguile. This is what they've done. It might have been Ivan Illich, the brilliant philosopher of medicine. He was also a Catholic priest, I believe. He said decades ago, it was in the 1970s, he said if Big Pharma is allowed to continue on its current trajectory, it will destroy humanity.
As soon as technological progress benefits the mass production of status for people, and does so beyond a certain proportion, people's ability to fend for themselves cannot but decline.
People laughed at him at the time, but look what they're doing now. Look what they're doing. Big Pharma, probably the most evil collective organisation which has ever infected or infested the surface of the world. But we're being fed a lot of lies through the mainstream media, the governments, big business. They've all rolled over. Big business was one of the first to bring in these so-called vaccination mandates. What a bloody disgrace. You know, they're all in on it. Their CEOs have all participated willingly in this atrocity. The first thing you must realise is that you are not free. You are in a sort of a prison of this perception of hyper-reality. You've got to realise that first before you can possibly step out of it. Most people do not come to that realisation. They think, oh yes, well, I'm living in the free world here and what I see is reality. The news media is telling me the truth, the government's telling me the truth. It's not the case. And what's going to happen to them? Well, they need to be obliterated, really. Don't get me onto the doctors. They have no excuse to be continuing to jab people with this poison. If they're still doing it, they're basically murderers. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm bloody angry about this, and I say to those doctors, when they look in that mirror in the morning and the evening, who looks back at them? A healer or a harmer? More and more people need to stand up. They need to not comply with this. As long as enough people do not comply, the globalists will fail. And I think there needs to be a reckoning. I'd like to see a very solid reckoning against them and those who facilitated their activities. We may think sometimes that we're up against something so massive that there's nothing we can do. That's little me thinking, as David Icke would say, little me thinking. If you think in that way, you will achieve nothing. You've got to realise that we're part of a whole community now. It's growing by the day, and the cracks on the other side, the cracks in the evil bastards who are pushing this, they're becoming quite big. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So don't expend all your energy in the short term thinking that you're going to drag down people like Andrews or Gunner or what have you. They'll be around for a while, but they will get their reckoning one day. You know, sometimes we think we're up against something so big and bad that we can't stop it, but I don't think that's the case. I'm optimistic that we will win this. You've got to hold the line. Don't get the bloody quacks, or if you do, there's numerous things you can take to counteract it. If those of you who've had it don't get any more, stop believing the mainstream media and the government and to big business. We can beat them. But it's got to come from the people, from real people, real Australians, real people in other countries. It's got to come from the ground up and connect with your spirituality, whether it's God or whatever your spirituality is. I've found some of the best people I've come across who are standing up are real Christians, not fake Christians who've rolled over. And look at some of the churches, they're telling all their constituents to get vaxxed. That's not real Christianity. We may not have quantity on our side, but we've got quality. Look at Robert Kennedy Jr. Tremendous role model. I think he's the best of the Kennedys yet. And no one in the establishment will debate him because his knowledge is so good on these matters. He's mounted so many lawsuits, going something like 500, he describes, of environmental cases up against big business that are polluting, killing people, and particularly against big pharma, going back a long way. His knowledge is encyclopedic, and he's not afraid of standing up. He often concludes his talks with, "I'll see you out there on the barricades. I'm going to die with my boots on." He's got a ton of guts. And so that we've got people like that on our side. I'm actually optimistic. Life's going to be better. It was so, our society we've been shown now how corrupt and rotten it had become by the subversion of the people who are pushing this thing. Something needed to happen. Maybe this was the thing that needed to happen. We'll need to maybe start from the ground up, and it's going to be better.